You know, the older I get, the more I realize that life rarely tells us when one chapter has ended and another has begun. When we're young, the changes are easy to recognize. Graduation, marriage, a new job, the birth of a child. Those moments arrive with celebrations and photographs. Everyone knows something important has happened. But later in life, change becomes quieter. Sometimes it's the first Monday after retirement. Sometimes it's the moment your children stop calling to ask for advice because they've learnt to solve life's problems on their own. Sometimes it's sitting at the dinner table and noticing there's one less place setting than there used to be. No one announces those moments, yet they change us just the same. I was reminded of that not long ago when I met a man named David. We had seen each other around the neighborhood for months. A nod here, a smile there. One morning we happened to sit on the same park bench overlooking a small pond. Neither of us was in much of a hurry. After a while he looked across the water and said, "I retired 6 months ago." I smiled. "How's it treating you?" He let out a little laugh. I thought retirement would feel like freedom. He paused before adding, "Instead, it feels like somebody forgot to tell me what comes next." There was something about the way he said it. Not angry, not bitter, just honest. Honesty has a different sound when you've lived a while. It isn't loud, it doesn't ask for sympathy. It simply tells the truth and lets it rest there. Looking across the pond, I realized David wasn't really talking about retirement. He was talking about the part of himself that hadn't quite caught up with this new season of life. I think many of us know that feeling. Our lives change faster than our hearts do. I think that's something we don't talk about enough. Most of us spend 40 or 50 years building a life around being needed. Someone needs us at work. Someone needs us at home. Someone is waiting for us to solve a problem, make a decision, answer a question. Then, one day, the phone rings a little less. The calendar becomes surprisingly empty. The world keeps moving, but somehow it no longer seems to need quite so much from us. That can be a lonely feeling, not because we're alone, but because we're wondering where we fit. David told me he'd been reorganizing his garage over and over again. His wife finally laughed and said, "If you organize those shelves one more time, they'll start organizing themselves." We both laughed. Then David quietly said, "I don't think I was fixing the garage. I think I was trying to fix the feeling that I wasn't useful anymore." His words reminded me of my father. After he retired, he developed a habit of sweeping the driveway every morning. It never seemed to need sweeping. Some days there wasn't a single leaf on it. At the time, I thought he was simply keeping busy. Looking back now, I wonder if he was trying to hold on to the rhythm of a life that had always asked something of him. Funny how we understand our parents a little better after we've lived long enough to stand where they once stood. A few mornings later, I ran into David at the grocery store. His cart held a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and 3 different brands of coffee. "Planning a taste test?" I asked. He grinned. "My wife told me to pick one." "So naturally," I said, "you bought 3. He laughed harder than the joke deserved. Then he looked at the shelves for a moment and quietly admitted, "Truth is, I wasn't ready to go home yet." We ended up walking to the little coffee shop next door. Neither of us really needed another cup of coffee, but neither of us seemed in much of a hurry to leave. We talked about ordinary things, the weather, baseball, how tomatoes somehow taste better when they come from your own garden. Then David smiled and said, "You know what surprises me most? I used to complain there weren't enough hours in the day. Now I have whole afternoons waiting for me to decide what they're for." I nodded, because I knew exactly what he meant. Sometimes freedom arrives before purpose does. A week later I saw him again, this time at the hardware store. He had birdseed, flower pots, a garden hose, and a bag of grass seed piled into his cart. "Starting a farm?" I asked. "No," he smiled, "just trying to find a reason to leave the house." Funny how the smallest sentence can carry the biggest truth. A few days passed before we met again at the park. David looked quieter than usual. My son called yesterday, he said. That's nice. It was. He skipped a small stone across the pond. He asked how retirement was going. What did you tell him? I said it was great. I waited. Then he sighed. I don't think I believed myself. Parents have a funny way of protecting their children, even after those children have families of their own. Sometimes we hide our worries because we don't want to become another burden. We tell everyone we're doing just fine while quietly trying to figure things out ourselves. Not long after that, David disappeared for nearly 2 weeks. I wondered if he was traveling or visiting family. When he finally returned, there was something different about him. Not younger, not happier, just lighter. Where have you been? I asked. My neighbor asked if I could help repair a fence, he said. Then another neighbor needed help hanging a ceiling fan. Before I knew it, someone else asked if I could fix a loose gate. He smiled. My wife says word got around that I don't know how to say no. I laughed. So, you're busy again? A little. He looked out across the water. But it feels different. How so? When I was working, people needed what I did. He paused. Now, I think they just appreciate that I showed up. That thought stayed with me the rest of the day. The older I get, the less I believe people remember us for what we accomplished. They remember who showed up. The friend who listened without trying to fix everything. The neighbor who helped carry in the groceries. The grandfather who had time to answer one more question. Maybe usefulness changes as we grow older. Maybe it becomes quieter, but no less important. We sat quietly for a while, watching a little boy trying to feed breadcrumbs to ducks that seemed far more interested in each other than in his lunch. David smiled. You know, my granddaughter came over last weekend. What did you two do? I was going to teach her how to build a birdhouse. And? We never got around to it. What happened? He laughed. She spent 2 hours asking me what every tool in my toolbox was for. So no birdhouse? No birdhouse. Waste of a day? He looked surprised. No, he smiled. I don't think so. She'll probably forget the names of every tool. He looked toward the pond and smiled again. But I hope she remembers that Grandpa had time for her. After a moment, he added, when my kids were little, I was always rushing somewhere. Work tomorrow. Bills to pay. Deadlines. Last weekend was the first time in years that I didn't look at the clock. He gently patted the old toolbox beside him. Funny. I thought I was teaching her about tools. Maybe she was teaching me about time. Neither of us said anything after that. We didn't need to. Sometimes the moments that accomplish the least become the ones we remember the longest. A few months later, I saw David again. This time, he wasn't sitting on the bench. He was kneeling beside that same little boy, helping him untangle a fishing line while the boy's mother watched from a nearby picnic table. They never caught a fish. Judging by their laughter, it didn't seem to matter. David caught my eye and smiled. I used to think purpose was something you retired from. He looked at the little boy. I was wrong. As I walked home that morning, I passed the bench where we'd first met. It was empty again. The ducks still drifted across the pond. Children still laughed in the distance. The world hadn't changed very much, but David had. And maybe that was the point. Life rarely changes all at once. It changes one conversation, one kindness, one ordinary morning at a time. Maybe that's the gift of growing older. Not that life becomes easier, but that we finally stop measuring our worth by how busy we are. We begin measuring it by something quieter. The kindness we offer, the time we give, the people who are simply glad we showed up. Perhaps starting over after 60 isn't about becoming someone new after all. Perhaps it's about discovering that the best parts of who we've always been still have somewhere to belong. Until next time, take good care of yourself and don't overlook the quiet beginnings. Sometimes they become the most beautiful chapters of our lives.